we will get started. Thank you, Amanda. We will call the meeting to order. Welcome to the Climate Action Advisory Board meeting for March 16th, 2022. Hope everyone's enjoying the nice weather. Nice March weather. Looks like it's going to last through the weekend at least. So that'll be great. Thank you. I'm trying to remember who did the meeting minutes. John, did you do the meeting minutes? No. Who did? Warren, thank you. Thanks, Warren, for doing the meeting minutes. Did everyone get a chance to review them? And were there any comments or questions on the meeting minutes from our February 16th meeting?
I had one comment. I got to go back to my notes because I read this a few days ago and made a note. When we had Dean talked about the solar article at our last meeting, and I had asked whether or not the CMLP, and Warren recorded it, that CMLP, had they been talked to? And he said that he had reached out to the chair, but I was just wondering, do we have any more information? Did anything follow up from that discussion? Yes. Oops, sorry.
So I was at the last light board meeting, and they discussed the strategic plan, which really provides the broader context in which they will then discuss the article, but they didn't get to it. So they plan to have a special meeting where they will continue that general discussion and discuss their position on that article.
Wow. Was there body language just saying, hey, this is a splendid idea?
No, there was body language kind of in other directions. Yeah, different parties who were on the phone. It wasn't all one position.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good follow up.
I think Amanda was there as well, so she may have more to say.
Uh-oh.
I think it was a tempered approach in that I think the discussion is welcomed, and I didn't get a sense if they were falling one way or the other, that they really wanted to explore it objectively and look at what could be done and what needed to be adjusted and what was realistic. So it seemed like that is where they were headed. And I guess I would offer or invite others to that upcoming meeting with the light board if you are interested in that specifically. They're going to have one sort of out of their regular session cycle. And it's going to be on the 30th. So if that's of particular interest to anyone, they're in the morning. They're a 7:30 morning crew.
So that'll be an agenda item in it with their other agenda, or is this a special meeting to talk about the strategy around gaining 20 megawatts?
So it is a continuation of their discussion on the strategic plan, but the solar is in their list of topic areas. And so I think they maybe had, say, 6 different topic areas, and they have 2 or 3 left, and solar is one of them.
Okay. That's a big deal, isn't it?
And I'm just gonna say, Jake skipped tonight because he didn't want to take notes on, but I can take notes.
Yeah, thank you. I was getting back to that as soon as we were done. I wanted to look and remind, and okay, thank you. And
I also just want to mention that I'm going to take advantage of my liaison position, and I'll be in and out.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah. All right, well, any other comments, any other questions from the board, or anything to get on record, I guess, related to the minutes? All right, I'll take that.
I was in that meeting, but I found the minutes very helpful to catch up. So
Good.
appreciate the quality.
Yes, I agree. Thank you, Warren, again. And Jake probably felt that he couldn't follow that quality, so that's in fact why he, I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
Pressure's
All right.
on.
All right, well, with that, I will ask for a motion to approve the meeting minutes from February 16th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from February 16th.
Thank you, Michael. In a second.
I'll second.
Okay, thanks, Warren. All right, all in favor of approving the minutes for our February 16th meeting? All right, so moved. And there's Jake. Just in time.
Hello, sorry,
Just in time.
late. I was having laptop issues.
That's okay.
Indeed.
We thought that you just didn't want to take notes tonight. You are on.
We were
Right.
disparaging you from.
All right, I even forgot
Abandoning
about
us.
that. Start enough word right now. Here we go.
Okay, all right. If you're ready, we just approved the minutes from February 16th. So you can note
Okay.
those. And Amanda probably has the particulars she can forward you, but
Okay. And
Anyway.
did we start recording this? Oh, good. Okay.
we did. Yep. You did. All right. All right. So with that, I'll give a quick update and I'll even start with a precursor to bullet A there. I did attend the chair's breakfast this morning, and the main, well, I guess two main things. One just more informational, that town meeting will be all in person in the spring. I can't remember the date. It's May 1st, I guess. And there was some discussion about, just is everyone okay with that, and any reason to move away from that. But I think that collectively decided, and not that they were the deciding board on that, but just getting, I think, a pulse of how people were feeling about that. But then the second thing related to town meeting was they encouraged all committees to discuss the upcoming warrant articles that related to their particular committee, and have the conversation that we hope to have later this evening, just to determine if there are ones that you might want to support as a group, and offered a couple of different ways to do that. I think we all know the drill, but anyway, that was the emphasis from this morning's meeting. And when we do get to the warrant articles, I'll give a couple more updates on things I heard. So so with that, the first quick item, or it may not be that quick, I guess. And you know what, I will share my screen. I'm realizing I'm looking at this, and you probably are too. The agenda. We've been talking, right, for a while now about how to bring in new membership onto the board. And, something that Amanda in particular has been looking into was the charge. And you know what, I'm realizing I should bring that up as well. See if I can find it quickly. Here we go. So this just so you can have it as a reference. But in the charge in particular, there is some language around membership, and I think this may be worth a revisit, either tonight, or we can tee it up tonight maybe and come back to it at our next meeting. But there's some language around membership that we thought was interesting and may be worth a revisit or a revise. So you can see there's some specific folks, if you will, or representatives that was called for in the committee charge. And so we've actually had a couple of conversations, both Amanda and I, as well as with Jerry Frankel from CSEC, because their charge, if I'm not mistaken, Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, their their charge has kind of similar language in it. And, so obviously this is very specific, and I don't think we're meeting this currently. If you read it, that we have at least, one representative from each of these groups. I'm pretty sure we're not. And so I guess the question is, should we be? Is there another way to get that representative voice from the different groups that are listed here? And I think, these are likely listed because these are committees that we see as having synergies with our group. And then should we go so far as to change the charge so that we have more leeway on that, so that our actual, our board as it currently stands kind of fits within that. And then also helps us in, who we're looking for moving forward, or how we, continue the recruiting effort. So I'm going to get Cab's thoughts on that really quickly. I don't think we'll go into a full, I guess, decision-making process on that, but I'd like to just get thoughts first, and then we can come back to it at our next meeting with maybe a proposed plan. I'm going to zoom in. Whoa, a little or a lot? There you go.
So I have a question. Do we have any members from the groups you highlighted in blue?
I'm actually technically, I think, the person recommended by the light board.
Okay,
Oh, by the light board.
good.
Might have been a secret, but.
Oh yeah, might have been. Good. Michael?
Well, I was going to say, I didn't know, Ryan, that you were representing or coming from the light board. I was saying maybe since so many of our blueprints have CMLP in it, and we keep talking an awful lot about, and rightly so, is our energy delivery company, having someone from the light board. So I gather you are our candidate from what you said.
Which doesn't preclude having another, but just we have that base covered. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Warren, how about you? Oh.
Yeah, two questions. Have we asked, given this list, have we asked Concord Public Works or Department of Planning and Management whether they have someone to recommend?
So I know when I was appointed to the board, I don't sit on the Public Works Commission, but I do public infrastructure work. And so I think there was some synergy there. But I'm not technically, I don't know what it means to be a representative. If you actually have to sit on both boards, and that's a requirement.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't say it has to be someone on the board. It says somebody recommended by them.
Recommended.
Because
So maybe I fit that.
Given this charge, we should ask them if they'd recommend anybody. And my second
agree.
question is,
I agree.
do we know whether there are folks who have filled out a form for the town saying they're interested in serving on the board?
I mean, we do check those regularly. If you're talking about the green card.
Yeah.
Yes. So we have.
I might be able to chime in there and say I checked it maybe in January, and we only had 2 people, I think, and their first choice wasn't CAB. It
Yeah.
was like one of their choices, but it wasn't in their top 3. And so then I had put in my newsletter a request that for people who are interested in CAB and CSEC to fill out a card. That whole system is undergoing a reboot. And so I haven't gotten any back from that. But in talking with Jerry and what I have heard of how we've replaced CAB members in the past, it felt like maybe you only get 2 to 4 per committee anyway. And so is having a restriction of shall include these representatives realistic, in that if only 2 people put in a green card for CAB, really Public Works is choosing from to people that may not even have public works experience. And so it could be loosened to be a recommendation of expertise rather than a true requirement of a representative as one option.
John, Brian, I don't know who is first, but you both have your hand up. How about John next?
Well, I was wondering if, one step would be to maybe ask, where a specific entity is charged with recommending someone, whether they could retroactively endorse one of us for some of the seats. So like you, Courtney, perhaps Public Works could endorse you. Maybe planning could endorse me.
Mhm.
And then that would narrow down who we have to
True.
find. I mean, I think Jake could be a business community representative. I'm not sure if that's meant to be local business community, but
He is
That's-
part of the business community. You are right.
There's a Staples in Acton. I mean, it's close.
It's not far. It's right.
Right over the
And-
border.
And you
Yeah.
know Concord people shop there, so. It's an interesting idea, John. Sorry, Brian, I don't know if I missed your hand. You did miss your hand. It's down now. And I don't know where he went, so we'll come back to him.
Sorry, I had to step away for 1 second.
That's okay. That's
I lowered my hand. Sorry, you made my comment.
Okay, all right. Matt,
Yeah, I just wanted to say that technically this looks like, at least in the case of the municipal light board, they would need to vote to recommend somebody. I think Public Works and the Department of Planning and Land Management, they can just, decide, their director could just decide, but
okay.
yeah, in the case of the light board, if you read this correctly, I think it says they need to vote to recommend somebody. That there is one benefit of this approach, which is the onus is on these
It's on them.
organizations to recommend
That's true.
somebody.
Versus, yeah,
You know?
versus us.
There's not such
Recruiting.
sad things in that.
Right. Jake, sorry. I think you have your hand up, and if you still have
Yeah,
something.
sorry about that. I'm just making sure I was unmuted.
That's okay.
I think just one comment about the Energy Futures Task Force. So I believe we had both Brian and Pam were members of CAB in the past. So that was checked off, but I feel like that task force was dissolved. So even trying to meet that is, my understanding is
It would-
somewhat difficult, if not impossible, unless those folks are circulating back through. So I think there could be a number of challenges with having this as a very stringent requirement, kind of in addition to what Amanda and others have brought up. I think some of it, at least for EFTF, and maybe I'm off base on that, but it seems like it made sense when you're founding the group, but may not be relevant going forward.
Okay. And then, I think you bring up an important point that maybe, Amanda, we should think about including in our process document related to the board in general is a review and update of this on occasion, every 2 years or something like that. I don't know what the frequency needs to be, but because if we were to leave something like this in here, and even if we change it to a recommendation over a requirement, I doubt these other things are going away, but it doesn't hurt to review kind of the whole charge and make sure it still makes sense. Okay, any other comments, I guess, before I move on?
Only just to say that I'd be happy to carry forward into the select board, any charge
Okay.
amendment recommendation you'd have.
Great. All right, well, based on this, it sounds like I think, Amanda, we could work together to come up with a revision that we propose the next time to vote on. I'm assuming a
Yeah,
vote would
I
need to
guess-
happen before it would go to the select board for amendment.
I'm actually a little confused of what direction there, like, I don't know if there's quite consensus on if we're retroactively assigning people to these and keeping it, or if we are loosening the language. I'm happy to bring something back, but I didn't get a clear sense of what direction to go.
Can I ask one other question? Maybe I should know, but is the charge in the original warrant article, or is this a charge that was written after? I'm just wondering, do you have to go to town meeting, or can town manager change it?
That's a question I can't answer. Matt, can you
I believe that
for that?
the town manager can make the change with the board, the select board's approval. It doesn't have to go to the town meeting, that's for sure.
Okay, okay. Okay, and Jake, did you have a recommendation or?
I'm sorry, I did not put my hand back down
Okay.
after I commented last time. There we
Okay.
go.
All right, so it does sound like, yeah, Amanda, I hear what you're saying. I don't know if we decided that definitively. And I'm just, looking at the time, trying to decide if we have that full conversation tonight or we table that. I guess I'm leaning towards keeping it as a recommendation rather than a requirement, but keeping it as a recommendation. So not eliminating the goal of having a representative from these various synergistic boards and committees. I think it, and maybe this leads into, let me go back to the agenda. Sorry. Kind of goes back to our conversation with Jerry and CSEC. Having a liaison who is doesn't have a vested interest necessarily in either of our two committees from these other boards and committees may not be as of enough value or significant value as someone who actually sat on our committee with interest in both. So I think, keeping it as a goal, but relaxing the requirement to have, in my mind, would at least help us towards that, but not preclude, other people who have a real passion and interest, but just aren't necessarily connected with those other committees. That's my thought. Any thought from the rest of the board on that?
One, I think we should probably table it, just looking at the agenda timing. But thank you for calling out this topic. Secondly, my preference would be try to comply with the charge as is, but at the same time, if that then proves to be problematic, I don't think that charge is critical to the functioning of the board. So as a fallback, I don't think it would be terrible to change the language if it becomes prohibitively difficult to honor it.
Yeah. Okay.
But again, let's maybe take this up next meeting.
Okay.
I think there's one advantage. I'm trying to think about what was the mission behind this. And I think it was the select board that actually drafted it, and the town manager, and it might've been Chris at the time. But one advantage of it, I think what they were after is they were trying to be more inclusive to get us into the organization. When I call the organization, the town structure, public works, municipal light plan, planning, that. And I think that might be helpful to get some of those. I mean, we're fortunate to have Amanda who reaches out to all of these directors, right, within the town structure. But having a couple of, almost critical ones, like planning is pretty critical. Fortunately, we have Brian for the light plan. But there's a few of those committees that I think if we were more inclusive and could actually find somebody willing, right?
Mhm.
Everybody says, thank you very much for suggesting that I take on more work. It doesn't oftentimes go over well.
Right, right.
So maybe we table it, think about that, and
Okay.
ask ourselves the question, within the group that we have, do we have enough representation that is inclusive to the structure of the town and how we're organized?
Yep. Okay, good. John, you have your hand up.
Yeah, no, I was gonna point out, I mean, ultimately, it's the town manager's responsibility, right? So all we could do is say, we need more members. We think the way the charge is currently written is maybe
Prohibitive.
a little limiting, and he may want to loosen that in consultation with the select board, but then it's up to
Ultimately
the
up to
town manager to decide what to do.
That's true. That's
Okay.
true. All right, well, with that, in 2 minutes, I will try to give the other 3 bullets there. So virtual meetings, I believe we have gotten, and someone, either Amanda or Matt, correct me if I'm wrong there, but I believe that the state has approved holding virtual meetings through the summer, I believe July. I don't know if that's includes July or if it's June 30th. But that was something that came up at, I believe, one of the chair's breakfast, if I'm not mistaken. So, we can operate as we have been until that point, and then I believe we'll need to go back in person. So just throwing that out there, which may necessitate that we rethink time of our meeting. But we don't need to deal with that today. We did have a good conversation, Jerry and Amanda and I, about our 2 committees and how they do have opportunities to, kind of support one another. And at one point we talked about combining of the 2 committees, but I think that's really off the table now. We see they each provide sort of a unique function in the space of climate and sustainability. So, but we have, visited the idea of having joint meetings, not just between our 2 committees, but also CSEC and CMLP. And I think there was actually a specific date that we talked about, if I'm not mistaken, Amanda, but it's failing me right now. So if you want to chime in, feel free. But CMLP is basically offered to kind of facilitate meetings, I think at their given time, though, of 7:30, if I'm remembering that correct.
So I think there's a little bit of flexibility there. I think so CSEC, a joint meeting with CSEC, given what they're working on and what the CAB's working on, it probably doesn't make sense to meet until June. But I also know there was a lot of questions about progress that the light plant was making, and I talked to Dave about that. And he suggested that maybe it would be good to have a joint meeting with the light board and CAB. And so I think some of that is being done in their current strategic planning meetings. So the one that I mentioned upcoming on the 30th. But if there's, I guess the invitation is there to have a joint meeting with them. And Courtney, we could meet with Wendy, the chair of the light board, and Dave, and figure out what that might look like or when that should occur. But that option is also there.
It would likely be an additional meeting, though, to our normally scheduled monthly meeting, is the way I understood it. And the same with CSEC. So I think we wanted to gauge the board's appetite for that. I think ideally we'd like to. It goes
and
back.
I think the CSEC one, I was of the understanding the meeting in June with CSEC would be a true joint meeting. So it would be Yeah.
They meet on Thursday nights, we meet on Wednesday nights. So I think it would be pretty easy to facilitate that with a slight change. The CMLP board meetings are quite different time than ours. And maybe we find a happy medium between 6 o'clock at night and 7:30 in the morning to meet. But it probably would be an additional meeting in any given month. But that being said, it could speak to that coordination that we've been talking about, that we feel might be useful. And then I'll jump to the last one before I take comment on that. But in the meeting with Jerry, we did discuss several different ideas around townwide sustainability awards, both at the resident level and the commercial level. And we've got some good ideas, but I think just given bandwidth as we're preparing for a town meeting and some things that CSEC's got going on, we decided we'd table that until that joint meeting, if it happens in June, hopefully, it could be a topic of conversation there. So just wanted to give an update on that. Very quickly, without I think a lot of discussion, what is generally the interest of CAB in pursuing finding a time for a joint meeting with CMLP and for making our June meeting with CSEC? Is that something that most on the board are amenable to? All right, I see a thumbs up. Thumbs up. All right. All right. All right, good. Okay. Then with that, I think Amanda and I can proceed with some scheduling. All right, I will.
But maybe not at 7:30 in the morning. What do you think?
I hear you. I hear you. Yep. Put that in the notes, Jake.
Courtney?
We will find a amenable time for everyone. With that, I will turn it over to Amanda for her director's update.
Great, thanks, Courtney. So as usual, I have my director's detailed report if you'd like to go through that, and it gives an update on all the projects. Some of the new things or updates is that Mass Save did expand their program to include any Concord residents that heat with natural gas. And CMLP expects to offer similar rebates to Mass Save to fuel oil customers and other heating sources except natural gas. And so that's really exciting and should hopefully speed up the transition because the rebates are pretty substantial. The Mass Clean Energy Center also launched a Mass Fleet Advisor support, which is technical support and in some cases financial support. And this is for any commercial fleet owners. I know that there are a few fleet owners in town that are already taking advantage of this, but just wanted to put it out there in case anyone knew of others in town, neighbors, or other people that you work with on other committees that might have a commercial business and a fleet. The community compost pilot has gone well. We needed to double the capacity at both sites in order to maintain the service to the people that had signed up. So we'll see how that goes and if we need to expand even further. There was an extension on the comment period for the DOER stretch code. And so if you hadn't had a chance to comment on that and you would like to, the extension was until March 18th. So you can send in written comments and the information is in there if you'd like to dig into that. And then the other sort of new thing in the director's update is that we did decide to move forward with the USDN Climate Justice Nexus pilot. And the DEI Commission had written a letter in support to participate in that pilot project. And the first step of that pilot is to identify a potential community organization to work with. And so I've got a list in the director's update that breaks organizations into racial justice orgs, climate change organizations, and then community organizing that maybe have a bit of both the racial justice and climate change framework in different committees. So if you get a chance to look at that tonight or later in the week, feel free to email me your thoughts on that or any other questions. And I wanted to take a moment to also introduce Annabelle. I see she was able to join us tonight. Annabelle is also a resident of Concord. She is job searching, so also please keep that in mind. But she's helping out the sustainability office as she job hunts. And so she's been helping do some discrete project work and given CAB's priorities. She may be tapping into some of those to help with research or could pull together materials and different things. And so just wanted to introduce Annabelle too as a new member of the team for an undetermined amount of time, but she's here and doing a lot of great work. So Annabelle, I don't know if you want to come off mute and say hi or introduce yourself at all.
Yeah, so I'm Annabelle. I have luckily been working with Amanda recently and, just helping her out with really anything she needs me to do. So if there's anything you guys need me to do either, I'll help out with anything, doing research, put anything together that you need me to do. As I've been looking to break into the realm of sustainability, which I've been finding is not that easy. So, so yeah, thanks for having me.
Well,
That's
thanks
terrific,
for-
Annabelle. Tell us what you're interested in. What would you're jumping in here. We have about 1,001 initiatives in play, but
so I personally am really interested in corporate sustainability and kind of sustainability consulting, the intersection between business and sustainability, because I feel like that, obviously in conjunction with public efforts, really is what can make a difference. So I've kind of been trying to look at stuff for that, but I've not been finding very many entry-level positions in that. But I find that the work that Concord is doing and that cities and towns have been doing on the municipal level is, really relevant, and very intertwined in, all sorts of different sectors and things. So I feel like it's a great way to, just broaden my horizons and learn more about what you guys are all working on at the local level.
excellent.
Great.
Well, welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank
And
you.
I'm sure Amanda will welcome the help, as will some of
Yeah,
our
we're building out a
members.
staff here, Amanda.
Yeah.
This is what you
Great.
need, another 5 people, I think.
Yeah, so Annabelle helped do some writing up of some materials that we use to engage MAPC on the hazard mitigation plan. She worked on a frequently asked questions page for the Concord Clean Comfort program related to air source heat pumps. She's got a few other things on her list. And so it might be easiest if you have an idea related to your priorities, a small task that we can break off, reach out to me and we'll get Annabelle looped in and she can get to know you all as well.
Yeah.
Great.
Terrific. All right. And any questions, comments for Amanda on her director's report before we move along?
Amanda, can I ask you a question going back to the big change with having Mass Save coming in with very aggressive incentives? Because a couple of people asked me this question and I don't know. As I understand it, Mass Save will, if you're a gas customer in Concord, you're going to be working with mostly Mass Save. People were saying, well, can you also bundle the incentive that comes from CMLP and the incentive that comes from Mass Save? I don't think you actually can. I thought the intent here was if you were a deliverable customer, if you had oil and propane, you're overworking with CMLP, but if you're a gas customer, you're working singularly with through the Mass Save. And then somehow Abode is in there, I gather, on both sides, or what's the clarity there?
Yeah, so the CMLP is aiming to primarily work with the fuel oil customers and is sending natural gas customers over to Mass Save. I don't know that it would be written into any requirements, so I can check on that, and maybe that's something that Jan is still working on, because CMLP hasn't published their rebate yet. They're still working on the rollout of that. And that was driven because she was waiting to see what Mass Save was going to do so we could do something similar. And one of the reasons CMLP was able to do something similar and offer those an increase in rebates was because the shift of demand of the natural gas customers over to Mass Save would sort of in some ways free up cash in order to make the rebate larger. So it is true that there's a division there. And that's how it's been for like the home energy assessments in the past too. So it sort of follows that same line of thinking. And then the heat pump coaches, which are paid through a BODE, can help you with either. And so they're really there to help you with making decisions and going through. There's a lot of acronyms when you start to talk about all the heating systems and getting it sized appropriately and all of that good stuff. And so the heat pump coaches are there to help you with that.
Thanks.
And on the topic of heat pumps, I think my other bullet under the director's note, although I think I'm probably about to run out on the schedule here, is we've had this continuing conversation around metrics and how do we track the transition of homes, and is the number we track the number of rebates because it's the easiest thing to track? Is it the number of building department permits? Because in theory, everyone should be taking out a permit. Is it the percentage of the home that's heated, which is a much harder metric to track, but maybe gives us the most realistic picture? And so we don't need to dig into metrics tonight. And I know that we were hoping to come back to metrics from my director's update last month. But given the need to kind of focus on warrant articles this month, Courtney and I decided to put that off until a future agenda. So I just wanted to get that on people's radar, that I'd like some feedback on what really is the metric we want to be looking at. Is it the ease of use of getting the rebates or a building permit? Or is it worth our time and effort to really do more of the digging and see if we can get a percentage of home heating? So again, we don't have to dig into it tonight, but if people can give a think about that before next meeting or send me your thoughts via email, would love to hear from you.
I would just throw out there, and we don't need to go into any depth, but I'm a proponent to actually have the metric tied to the goal, so that what kind of greenhouse gas reductions have we contributed? And I know it's harder and I don't have a solution, and I've been thinking about it to get at it, which is one of the reasons why we oftentimes defer to how many rebates did we give, or how many houses said they were kind of interested. But in the end, the litmus test is how well are we doing on reaching the goals that we set from Article 51. And so having everything that we do saying we move the needle, we're 5%, 6%, 8%, and obviously we want to get to 100% of the carbon tons that we put out there. So I would offer that, which is probably not helpful because I don't have the solution of how you would do it. But I think that that's really the litmus test, and it's also what the IOUs do, is they evaluate and they measure, and when they go back to the department, they go back with precisely the amount of greenhouse gases, which is what they're, or in this case, it's megawatt hours, and most recently with decarbonization, they actually have to have an empirical number of how many tons of carbon all these initiatives and things that they're doing have contributed, and they put it on a spreadsheet. And I think maybe if we follow something like that, it might be helpful. And when people ask us, well, how are we doing on the needle? We'll be able to say, this is how we're doing.
Mhm.
We're 7% of the way, we're 12% of the way, or we're 50% of the way. Thanks.
I think Warren and John both have their hand up for a additional
John,
comment.
you were first.
Oh,
Hey. Yeah, well, maybe we're going into this too much at this point, but
It sounds like we weren't going to go there, but we're going there.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm becoming less enamored with using greenhouse gas emissions as a metric. I think it's something we should track as an indicator, but doing emission inventories are fraught with issues, and there's a lot of emissions we don't even count because there's no data. And so I like the idea of having, I know what we have to do is we have to decarbonize every building and every vehicle, at least. And so if it's possible, I would like to see metrics that help us track how many buildings and how many vehicles are converting, and also be able to track renewable energy supply for the electricity. But I know that it's hard to get data still, even for that. And so I would say use what you can get, but just be very clear about what the data can tell you and what it can't tell you.
good comment.
I agree a lot with John's comments. What I would suggest is that we should go, we only have one Amanda in this town, and she has a lot of duties. And we should start with what data could we get easily, which is things like the number of households that get rebates for installing heat pumps, and see where that gets us, what we can do with that. And we could make some assumptions. We could basically do something where we say, let's assume that 2/3 of those households only converted part of their system and 1/3 converted the whole system. But let's start with the easy data to see what that shows us before spending lots and lots of time trying to dig up data that's going to be hard to get.
Okay. No, I think those are all good comments. So we've got sort of the whole gamut there. That's what I see. Why don't we, we do want to come back to this, as Amanda mentioned. So we will make sure that gets on hopefully our next agenda, that we can maybe look again at what is being tracked currently, and then kind of, look at it with a little more critical eye and give Amanda some specific feedback. How about, at the risk of going a little over time, I had one last question. I did get to review the municipal fleet electrification study and provided, some comments. I don't know if they were helpful or not, but I'm curious, what's the next step for that? Do you know? Where's that headed next?
Yeah, so I did receive comments back from the senior management team. So those have gone back to the consultant to make the updates. Overall, there was generally pretty good feedback. Some concerns of just like highlighting specific operational needs and making sure that those were accounted for. But overall, pretty good feedback. And I think once it's finished, I think I may do a little round robin around the town and just meet with people again and really say, like, this is what it says for your fleet, and this is how many chargers you'll need in your facility, and make sure that sort of those top level highlights really sort of sink in.
Yeah.
So that's sort of, I think, the next steps for that. And I believe the town warrant article related to the fleet study also set aside some funding to get started on implementation, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
So we might be able to sort of move into implementation on some of those, and which some buildings are already doing. I know that the facilities group was over at the police station, I want to say this week, putting in their new Tesla charger for their new Tesla.
How about that? Is that wild or what? A Model Y at the police station.
Yeah. Great.
So yeah, things are moving forward there.
Good. And just generally, if, for those who didn't get a chance to take a look at it, it basically laid out a plan for, as vehicles are going to be renewed, switching those over to generally to electric. We can't across the board. There are some, some very specific vehicles within the fleet that just there is no electric alternative yet, but always continuing to look for that. So, so I thought it was, well done, and hopefully lays out a plan. So,
is there a policy in place now, Amanda, that when we replace a vehicle, that it will be either A, reviewed in the context of electric, or we will simply replace them with an EV, period?
Yeah, we do have a sustainable fleet policy that asks to, it's an electric first policy. There is a clause for the things that Courtney mentioned. Some don't have an electric option, or some maybe do, but it's triple the cost, or something like that. And or maybe it doesn't have it has an electric option, but it doesn't have as much of like the strength to pull what we need to pull or do the things we need to do. And so there are clauses in there for that. And I think there's a statement in there that if you don't buy electric, then there needs to be a sign off for it. So we do have that. And on the state level, they also are coming out with new statewide contracts. All of the light duty vehicles have to be hybrid or more electric. And so that's also, I think, a nice way that that's going to move forward and be supported.
That's excellent.
Yeah, it's good to see. No, and I didn't realize we did have a specific policy, so that's good to hear as well. All right, with that, we're a little bit or a lot over time, but I think we're still okay. And any last questions? We can move to our work plan check-ins. All right. With that, just again, in the interest of time, a quick check-in would be appreciated. Just a quick update if you have it. If you have no update, that's okay as well. But we'll just kind of walk down the list. Jake, you're up first. Anything that you've been able to work on?
Yeah. Should I share what I have in the work plan template, or would it be best just to speak to it? I'm guessing that would require multiple steps to give me permission to share. So I can plan to speak to it if that makes sense.
I can stop sharing and you can try, see if it works.
Okay.
In one step. Here you go.
All right. Can everyone see that reasonably well? I guess I could zoom in. So I did go through and at least put together a rough draft of a work plan. It would be great to get feedback from folks on the different partners that I've identified and whether there's other folks there. I think there's certainly other deliverables that I haven't kind of captured here, and milestones and steps that I need to build out. I also need to put more work into the schedule. The one kind of main tangible item that I have kind of coming up is I'm speaking with NEEP, which has worked with the city of Montpelier in Vermont on a program for that community to basically provide essentially home energy scores. And they have a couple of tools that they've developed that I thought might be potential resources for us. So I've got a call with them tomorrow at 1 p.m. to talk through their expertise in this space. And they also mentioned that there is and I don't know, Amanda, if you've heard of about this or not, I think it's just getting started. They're trying to put together a cohort of communities that are interested in energy scoring, and I think particularly residential energy scoring, but I'll learn some more about it tomorrow. My hope is really just to understand how might this fit into any potential program for Concord, what are the requirements, and then learn more about this cohort. So that should be interesting. The other area that I think would be really helpful, and I think this ties into the conversation earlier about the light plant and kind of meeting with the light board. One of the areas that I think would be helpful to get initial feedback and ongoing feedback is kind of through light plant leadership as well as the light board about this concept, and to kind of continue to refine how we approach it so that we have can come up with some proposals that ultimately make sense based on the different stakeholders that would need to kind of support or sign off on it. So that's kind of where I'm at. I was not able to get as much done as I would have liked on this over the last month. February seemed to melt away. So
Actually, I think this is
stop
a
there.
great start. This is a great start.
Okay.
Nope, perfect.
Any
Good
questions?
update.
Or do we want to just wait?
No, I think if anyone has questions, keep them short. All right, well, we'll look forward to an update from you next month, and hopefully that'll include your call with NEEP and some other things. So great, thanks, Jake. All right, Paul, John, you have an update there on the climate vulnerability assessment? Or Amanda, you're working on that as well?
Well,
No,
I think there.
Go ahead, John.
I was saying, I think there are two pieces. There's the work on the flood modeling that Amanda's been doing all the legwork on, and then there's sort of the general recommendation around the vulnerability assessment, which I think I took on, but I haven't made progress on. So maybe Amanda could talk about the flood modeling. Unless Paul, you had something else you wanted to add.
No, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, I think it has been a little in my court as I sort of
I'm going to
coordinate with different stakeholders.
Go downstairs and put my earbuds in and I start.
Hold on.
Just gonna mute
There we
Dean
go.
quick.
Thanks.
And so the modeling piece, so the MVP action grant is the funding source we're targeting for the Suasco flood model, and also trying to decide how do we incorporate, or can we incorporate groundwater recharge or low flows into that model within the time frame we have, and working out the best way to go about getting a scope of work quickly and a budget quickly. Concord Public Works does have a contract for phase 1 of an integrated water resource plan, and a part of that does have grant assistance in it as a part of that contract. And so thinking through that, and if that's a good option, and so we're working through logistics on that, but would be seeking some technical help to put together a scope of work. And then I would love to have John and Paul's feedback on that. And if there are things that we should bring to the broader board, we can do that as well. And then for the hazard mitigation plan, which is where we saw an opportunity to do some more sectoral vulnerability analysis, which is similar to how the state does their hazard mitigation plan, and is something that Paul has been involved in. And we were targeting a FEMA grant for that. I called over to MEMA to see what the funding timeline would be. I had heard that they had funding available and ready to give out. And so I was assuming it was a fairly short turnaround, but they didn't think they would get funding out until maybe even October, November of this year, and our plan expires in November. The fire chief is hoping to apply to some FEMA grants this upcoming round, and so we do need to have the HMP finished before, or in order for him to, apply, or other departments to apply for that. And FEMA brick programming is going to have a lot of funding this year too, and so we want to make sure we continue to be eligible for that. So the town, we're working internally to see if we can fund that plan through existing resources, but also haven't given up on the potential to do some extra sectoral analysis. And for that, we're like pulling from action items that were in Sustainable Concord. So one of them, for example, was doing a vulnerability assessment under climate change projections for critical infrastructure. That really dovetails nicely with what you have to do for a hazard mitigation plan anyway. And so that could be a piece of it. Looking at maybe sectors related to like natural resources, and as another vulnerability assessment that we had in Sustainable Concord, could we pull that in? And then making sure that we're not losing pieces from other things that we've done. So as a part of Sustainable Concord, there was the vulnerability assessment for the different town centers, making sure that that gets pulled in. And then regionally, I know MAPC has done some heat mapping with future projections, and a typical HMP would really only look, or hazard mitigation plan, sorry for that acronym I've been using, would only look backwards rather than forwards. And so making sure that we have a scope that's large enough to support that we're really looking forward more than as what's required by FEMA. So because we need to move quickly with that as well, figuring out the funding and scope piece is probably going to occur, I would imagine, in the next week or two. So we can get started on that quite quickly. And I had already been talking closely with MAPC about some of this. They did our last plan. And so they may be willing to sort of talk through this as well.
Do they have any sort of funding for hazard mitigation?
Funding
mechanisms?
No. But they do have a competitive price compared to other ones that I've seen.
Sure. Okay. Any questions on any of that? No, good update though. Lots moving, it sounds like. All right, financing, Warren, any updates?
Yeah, I'll be very quick. We keep learning about additional financing options. One thing folks should know about is that residents who participate in switching over their heating, who are gas customers who switch over their heating system to heat pumps, are eligible to apply for up to $25,000 in zero interest loans from Mass Save, which is a good thing in making that more feasible for folks. But what we're going to need to do, because that's only a segment of the population we reach, is to have several different financing options in there. For this committee, subcommittee, the ball's in my camp. I need to be putting together a memo for Michael and Amanda listing the pluses and minuses of all the options we've identified so far. Then we're going to meet with the staff at CMLP to talk about it with them. I'm going to be getting that to Michael and Amanda within the next week. That's all I have to report.
Great, great. That's exciting stuff though, because the financing piece is big. All right, and I'll do a quick update. The planning board, Amanda and I talked about this a bit over the course of this month, probably not as much as we should have, but and feel free to chime in, Amanda, where it makes sense. But what I guess came to light is that there are some reviews going on and even some budget set aside for reviews, planning board reviews that would dovetail with the sustainability or the sustainable development guidelines that we had sort of talked about pursuing. And so given that, and that, won't, I guess, be officially approved until town meeting when budgets are approved, we're sort of, I guess, maybe on hold a little bit to do a really big push on this. But some of the pre-work we identified was to, do some research on other towns, what other towns are doing in terms of sustainable development guidelines and things that we might be able to pull in here, as well as, doing some pre-meetings if we can, if it's feasible with the folks from the planning board to just sort of, I guess, explore this option and how, we might go about these in the plan development review process. And I think we'll be looking at how that's done in other communities as well. So I was thinking about Annabelle and her, working with the group. It might be something that we could, task Annabelle with. Potentially, we can talk about that offline. And I would just mention one thing that came up, and I see, Matt, your hand up. Let me finish the thought and then I'll get to you. What came up this morning, I believe it was with the HDC, Historic District Commission, they were also discussing the architectural review process that they, I think they're looking at maybe a review of that process. And it made me think that there might be some, opportunities for synergy there because, even in that architectural review process, there might be opportunities for us to input different sustainable concepts. I know that's been something that in little snippets has come to light for me in some of my work, that can sometimes limit what we can do on the sustainability front or climate front in the name of historic. And so, just can we think outside the box and still keep it in line with what they are trying to do in their goals as well. So I'll turn that over to Matt now.
I'm just relaying back to the previous update about the mass save, and just to note that during the light board meeting, I heard something that I had not heard before, which was while you need to shift to get the full rebate, you need to shift all of your heating over to the new system. You don't have to rip it out, the old system. And in fact, if you just sign a statement saying that you're only going to use this system in an emergency or weather event, extreme weather event, then you can keep that system and still get the full rebate. Clearly you're using the new system as your sole source of heat, except for in that case. And I think that really could go a long way to address the anxieties that people have about having a, literally 100% dependency, on that system. So I just think there's got to be some way to, publicize that because it's something I hadn't heard before, and it was just
yeah.
quite surprising. So
Yeah,
anyway, and it
yeah,
could,
well, that's a
yeah,
good
I think, increase the number of
clarification.
participants.
Clarification.
Yeah.
It is a good question. How are we are we promoting that in any way currently that anyone's aware of?
No, not that I know of. Again, this
Yeah.
was the first I heard it was at this last light board
Okay,
meeting.
okay. But
It's
even
such a
the
recent-
Mass Save program itself, I guess, that this change has occurred. Michael?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's been so recent that Mass Save has taken a very strong direction on
Okay.
in renovations and additions. And as Matt said, for a whole home conversion, it's pretty substantial. But they also maintained, early on, they had the notion that in order to be confident that the savings, which is driving this with the department, right? When they come back and say, how much did they achieve? That they felt uncomfortable with having a fossil fuel system, still in the home. And it came up with what was so ill-advised to suggest that, well, if you're going to go and make this transition, we want you to rip out your fossil fuel system, which just isn't practical. And that got changed very quickly. And then partially recognizing that not everybody has the opportunity to convert their home 100% off of fossil fuels to a heat pump scenario, so that you could do a partial replacement and you would receive not that $10,000, I think it's $10,000, but I think it's $1,250 a ton of
Partial
energy
credit,
savings.
so to speak.
Right. So if you had a part of your house, the first floor, and it was suitable to, be able to put in, a ductless system, mini splits or whatever, then you could still receive $1,250 done for that. So now there's the recognition that it's not shabby to reduce your greenhouse gases, your carbon footprint, or your gas reduction by 50%.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that, 50 or 60%. If that, in fact, is 20% of your investment. And so the notion would be that the other 30% or the other 40% is a very, very sizable investment, because then you're getting into ducted systems, and it's much more complicated. So now that they've really begun to recognize that not every home is the same, not everybody's willingness to get off of fossil fuel 100% is the same, and you've got options.
Yeah.
So I think that's hopefully that will spur more customer participation than what we've seen with being quite so, focused on 100% solutions. What's wrong with a 50% solution when you get 8,000 customers versus 100% solution from 3?
Right. It's a good start. Yeah. Good point. Okay. All right. With that, any other check-in comments or anything anyone wants to ask a question about? Or
I wanted to bring something up for the CAB to consider, because it's been floating around a little bit. And that is whether or not we have a policy, or we should initiate a policy in the event that we have particularly municipal buildings that go through, as they do through their useful life, replacement, whether it's a replacement of the roof. The example I'm thinking of is the most recent, which I understand from the Alcott School, is a request that has come, and I know that Dean is available too, so maybe he can elucidate more. But a replacement of a $350,000 capital request to replace the boiler that's in the Alcott School. And one would think that we would, given our policies and the sustainability, that there would be some recognition or some mechanism that any kind of capital replacement would first be screened from a design review standpoint of other alternatives, whether it be electric or high performance or whatever. And now my understanding, there's 2 schools that are going to replace their entire roof. And is that an opportunity for someone to look at the opportunity for, putting in solar perhaps? But the larger question is, as we look at our built environment and as over time, things have the end of their useful life, do we have a mechanism in play that ensures that it's not the last minute, oh my gosh, we've got to do something about this boiler, but we only have 2 weeks and we've got to get to the finance people and we've got to get some capital together. It's a planning function. It's a planning function. And we had that with Chris Whalen earlier on when we were looking at all of our municipal buildings, many of them that were heated with oil. And there was a mechanism at that time to look at gas conversion, right? Isn't that interesting? Gas conversion, right? But believe it or not, we were using oil in all of these places. And so there was a pretty large gas conversion effort that was, a number of the buildings were changed out. Now we're at the point where wouldn't we want to be able to ensure that same kind of analysis and evaluation would be for electrification of these buildings? But it's also a planning thing. So because it's last minute, so you can't say, oh, hey, let's all get together. We've got to replace this boiler. You need to have a policy that sets the pathway, right? So I don't know. What do you think? Is that something we should be engaged in? Is it, Amanda, do you know of any policy like that? Is that a select board function, Matt? I don't know. What should we do?
So I can hop in here, and I've been in some email threads and conversations with the school and with others about Alcott throughout the last few days. And this is, I think, in some ways a product of what you were highlighting, Michael, that we've started to think about some of these things very differently, and different opportunities are available now than they were historically. So Alcott is a phased project. So this is something, to my understanding, the upgrade to their heating system has been happening over the last 3 years, and this is the last of the phases. And so it is costly to reconsider at this point to go back. But also in my digging through the sustainability files at the town is that we did have an audit completed for Alcott. And I think it was done through support of National Grid. And given that context, the recommendations were more energy efficiency related rather than energy transition related. Because there wouldn't have been a cost driver or a regulatory driver for National Grid at that time to provide an audit saying you should go electric. And so the condensing boiler that is being putting in actually was on the green communities list that I have access to as a project that the town was aiming to move forward. And so I think part of this is an evolution of thinking, an evolution of technology and rebates available, and it does really come back to the planning piece. And so I wanted to provide some of that context from the conversations that I had been having. And then I think the sustainable fleet policy that we had been talking about earlier could potentially be a model that could be used as a starting place, say, for a sustainable facilities plan. And I think in the same, or sustainable facilities policy, and then the same way that we had the fleet study to support that transition in the policy, we may also need a municipal building plan if we do make a policy. So also thinking through, we want to, if we put the policy in place, really understanding how we do that and helping on, the different facilities heads figure out what that transition would look like. And I think another point of a lesson learned on the planning side is the Green Communities grant that we received for Ripley for the air source heat pumps there will actually exceed the electrical panel. And they're anticipating needing to do like $300,000 to $400,000 of work to put in those air source heat pumps. And so we've got to get our technical ducks in a row for sure in the
Right.
planning department. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, here we are out, right? We're going into this residential sector. We're trying to do everything we possibly can to, take 8,000 homes, right? And move to electrification and weatherization and efficiency. And what about our municipal buildings? Why are we not thinking proactively, not wait necessarily? One thing is if they fail, one would hope that we'd have a policy like that's what we're talking about.
Mhm.
But imagine if we were to think even broader and bolder to start to tick off one by one how we could take the municipal buildings and electrify them so that we're consistent about the messaging we're trying to deliver in the town, right?
Some municipalities have facility improvement plans for their municipal buildings. So usually it's based like on an inventory of the building, all the systems, including the facade, and then take into account all the things that municipalities have to do now, like accessibility, historic preservation, sustainability, and resilience, and figure out, how all of that's going to be done in a systematic way. And you need the inventory information because, like, if you have like a 5-year-old boiler, you're probably not going to electrify that building, but you could put it on the schedule to be electrified at, in 2040 or something. But it's also having to make all those improvements is obviously really costly, right? So that helps the municipality plan out its capital budget as well. So maybe the town has that already, I don't know. Or maybe we don't have enough buildings where that's the best thing to do. But I mean, that's one way I know.
Yeah.
In Cambridge has that kind of plan, and it's not easy as as an observer of it.
And I think it's a great idea. Michael, I think it's a good topic of conversation. I suggest we table it for tonight, but I like that you brought it up, and I'll add it to my growing list of future agenda topics because I think it's important. And we can talk through particulars. All right, with that, let's shift our remaining focus to the warrant, the town warrant that's in front of us or proposed. We listed a couple of, I'd say, obvious warrant articles that might, solicit our support. But then there may be others too. So we can just start with the two that we listed. And Dean, thanks for joining us tonight. So maybe questions. So let's start with, I guess, number 15. It's pretty short and sweet. And I just wanted to get committee comment on Article 15, the establishing of an electrification trust. I'll open it to comment from the board. Should we be showing our support as a board, and if so, what would that look like?
If I could interrupt in my role as a finance committee member and just speak regarding how this came up in the context of a finance committee hearing, this is not anticipated to be moved.
Okay.
So it had something to do with a charitable donation of some magnitude that an individual wanted to make. And so the town placed this particular article on the warrant in order
Okay.
to be in a position to accept this large donation. I think it's to encourage electrification or whatever.
Mhm.
And since that was placed on the warrant, I think that the logistics of all of that just became cumbersome, and they're going to do the same charitable thing, but in a different way. And it's not,
Okay.
so this is not going to be moved. I just thought I'd let you know. So
I
saves you a
appreciate
little-
that.
saves you a minute of
Not gonna be
conversation
moved.
about something.
That's right. Yep. Nope. I very much.
Matt,
appreciate
maybe you can comment, but I think that's the take on that.
You've just said every word that I've heard. I have not heard any more than those.
it. Excellent.
But
Okay.
yes, I concur. that-
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we do not expect a motion.
All right, then we will move on. All right, Article 38 then. Dean was good enough to come talk with us about this at our last meeting. And I just wanted to open it up again to the board to understand, whether we wanted to more officially show support for this. Dean is here, so if we have questions, follow-on questions, we can pose those as well. And I think maybe someone did, or maybe I'm misremembering that. Yeah, so at this point, I do the same that I just did a minute ago for the previous article. Open it up for comment and proposed support if that's what we choose.
I think we should support this. I think we should ideally write a letter of support in endorsing this, and that the chair of our board should be prepared to make a comment at town meeting.
I'd second that. I think that would be, it shows that what the position of the CAB is on that article. And brings us as a player in it.
Okay. Any questions, any points of clarification?
Yes,
Warren?
I'd like to make a motion that CAB endorse this article, and that we endorse having the chair of CAB present a letter in support of the article and make a statement at town meeting in support of it.
And I would second that motion.
All in favor? So be it. All right.
Well, I thank you all.
I would love any examples that we've done. I know we've done this in the past, even in my tenure, which has been short. Maybe we can dig through the files and see what we can find, just to make sure we get the language right around that.
I can share a few things with you, Courtney, for sure.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate that.
And Courtney, if I can make a comment, that I don't think you need to worry too much about the wordsmithing on any statement or anything. The important thing is to make a statement saying that we're endorsing the article. We think it's important, and
Yeah, fair
the
enough.
members of CAB unanimously voted to support it. Beyond
Perfect.
that, I'm not sure you need to do very much.
Sounds good, Warren. I appreciate that.
I think it's almost similar to what we did for the middle school, right? When we were talking about the solar
Right.
Installation, and we lent our support to that.
Correct. Yeah. Okay, good. Good.
Dean,
Oh, go ahead.
yeah. Dean, I just have a question for you. You weren't here, I don't believe, at the very beginning of this meeting, but one of the things we talked about is with respect to that article, there was going to be a discussion with CMLP and to get their feedback from that. Do we have any more information about how CMLP feels about that article?
I don't really have any particular feedback from CMLP. The light board had an extensive meeting at their last regular meeting where they reviewed their entire, the CMLP's entire strategy. And they did not actually talk about this, what this article is related to. They decided to defer strategic conversations of that to an ad hoc meeting to be scheduled that they had not had yet. So in terms of direct conversations with the light plant, I've had none. With the light board, I made myself available to them in the same way that I made myself available to you. And they've engaged in this strategic review, and they have one more meeting to go, and Article 38 will be the primary piece of conversation at that meeting. So, so far we're just getting going with them.
Amanda mentioned that at April 30th, I gather it's going to have a much larger focused discussion.
Right.
Yeah.
March, I think March. 30th.
Yeah,
It's March
Or March.
30th. I'm sure it's not.
Just want to make sure the notes
It'll
are
be before
correct.
town
March
meeting.
30th.
Yeah.
Right.
John, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was wondering if I agree with Warren. I don't think the letter needs to be complicated, but I wonder for town meeting if some kind of presentation about why 20 megawatts matters in terms of the goals might be something to prepare for, unless someone else is going to do that.
The best I can. I'm actually, I think that I'm just playing off the CAB and the climate action plan statistic that is part of the targets. So I just said, we haven't done anything towards this target since 2017. And so I'm just encouraging us to work towards the target in the climate action plan. And if I don't know that I can necessarily defend 20 versus 25 versus 15. I'm just saying we need to be in alignment. That's really the goal of the article.
Well, it's in the CAB plan, as I recall, isn't it?
Yeah, it
Where
is.
we
It's in the
say
climate
20
action plan.
20
Yep,
megawatts.
it's 20. Yep.
So we already have set that as the standard.
Yeah. I guess I'm just anticipating that, there might be an argument that the CMLP will acquire sufficient renewable energy from outside Concord that we don't need all that on site. I mean, I think there are other reasons to have it in town. And so it just seems like being prepared to get into some of that detail might be useful. Maybe it won't be necessary, but.
Right. Well, that brings us back to the very beginning, John. You'll recall we were talking about RECs, and are RECs really moving the market? And is that the strategy we really want to put ourselves into? Or do we want to have, actual installations in our town so that we can show that we're invested in this outcome as well as other communities around us? We keep sort of having this circular discussion about all of this when it's really just, guys, let's get out, let's stall 20 megawatts and let's get going. And by the way, let's get some cars. And by these buildings we've got, what are we doing with them? It's like, it's an academic exercise when it's very clear what we need to do.
If it were easy, it would have already been done, Michael.
Yes, exactly. If it were easy, somebody else would have done it.
Courtney, I'm just wondering, I don't know the timeline. Were you a part of CAB when Sustainable Concord was created?
I was, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just thought so for example, I was not in the conversations on why 20 megawatt was chosen, and I can dig in my files, but I thought if you were writing a letter, maybe it would have been helpful to have a historic context. But if you were here, you've got it, so we don't have to go into it.
Well, that's presuming I remember, so we may have to.
We have to go back and
we may have to collectively think about that.
Yeah, I may have something.
You might have something, Brian. That'd be
Yeah.
good.
And I think there was also in a strategic document from the light board itself, they had said that they wanted to install 25 megawatts, and 20 megawatts was the number I think that made it into the plan. So I think there's additional
It fit.
report that this was something that was being considered kind of independently before the action plan, that I think would, support any argument around why this number.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Good
Okay.
recollection, Jake.
Yeah. I
Well,
appreciate the
Dean
memory.
and Charlie have shared that with me. I think Brian Foltz first mentioned it a while back, so it's not something that's necessarily been that I was familiar with before they shared it with me. So.
All right, so we'll open it up then to any other articles that hopefully you got a chance to kind of take a look at. There's any other articles that are on the current warrant that would make sense for our group to at least discuss and or consider support.
I don't know if this is an article, and I hope this isn't distracting us, but all of the thinking that's been going into the Thoreau Depot and the planning for that, and it seems to have been deliberate, and it may very well be appropriate to be deliberate, not to include sustainability in there as one of the attributes or outcomes of that planning process, because that presumably might be handled by somebody else, right? It's another group that would do that, or if these articles that we're talking about. But is there a reason to go back and look at that Thoreau Depot planning process, and from the CAB standpoint, should we be engaged in any way to ensure that the attributes of sustainability are also part of that planning process? Matt, do you have any ideas on that?
I was just trying to figure out how to raise my hand. So it is a difficult thing. Of course, we do have the changes that are happening with the stretch code, hopefully to become at least closer to net zero. And other than that, when the planning board has actually been quite assertive about trying to promote more sustainable practices in town, but they've been more or less thwarted by state law. Essentially, the Commonwealth has state building code, and there are other regulations regarding utilities, and it's just very difficult to make any kind of regulations around this. There are some opportunities to give potentially some bonuses in density. There's only so many things that can be given. And of course, they are not necessarily popular if you give a density bonus when you're already trying, in the case of Thoreau Depot, to create the maximum density that would be appropriate for the neighborhood. So, it's frustrating, but it's probably a very low yield activity as compared with some of the other initiatives we've been talking about here. We really just have to, we've advocated, of course, with the state to try to, provide more proactive planning regulations. And if they were enacted, we would certainly seek to get that to be Concord standard. But until that happens, we don't have that much we can do.
Right.
Lots of hands. John, I think I saw yours first.
Yeah, I would support thinking about adding some kind of provisions. I agree with what Matt says, the state preemption that is tying the town's hands, but I think there could be ways to make it very clear in the zoning bylaw what the town's goals are, and set up review processes centered around emissions performance that don't go all the way up to saying you can't install a gas-fired system. I think that would be useful to do, even if it doesn't get us all the way to where we want to get to. And obviously it's, when you have a new development, that's when it's easiest to do these things. So whatever we can do to get, because otherwise that building's not going to, whatever goes up is not going to be net zero by 2050. So.
Right. And I've noticed in other communities where they've been constrained either by state law, federal law, or a whole host of other obstacles, they've used their planning boards to really maneuver around that, to your point, John.
Yeah.
Amanda, I think you had your hand up next.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think, to my understanding, the Thorough Business District bylaw has also brought some attention to the site plan review process. We currently have a site plan review bylaw that does say that you need to incorporate sustainability, but it's not defined as to what that means. And in a corresponding regulation, it could be defined as to what that means. And I think that would be a really nice area for CAB to play a supportive role to the planning board in my, sort of view of things. And then Courtney had pointed to earlier, the subdivision regulations are also undergoing review next year if the budget is approved as proposed. And that's another way that sustainability could be possibly incorporated into new development. And so I think those two avenues of regulating any new development in town, either the subdivision regulations, updating the existing ones, and then creating a site plan review regulation to mirror the bylaw, are really two opportunities in the near term for CAB to support that effort. And I can't say how Thorough Business Depot District relates, how much of the change in that district would trigger a site plan review. But that might be something to take a look at. Because if all of it would, then that's really where that opportunity comes from, rather than district by district, if they all point to a site plan review anyway. But I'll just also say that at the Thoreau Business Depot District public hearings, this is a transit-oriented development, smart growth update, or that was a goal of the update, which I think is in alignment with the mobility goal in Sustainable Concord, and that we were looking to promote walkability and bikeability and access to transit. So wanted to put those three pieces out there.
I had a chance to listen to that, and I was so impressed with the planning board and all the thinking that they were putting out there for citizenry to comment on. As mentioned, transportation, pedestrian friendly environment, setbacks, building heights. It just seemed that it was so excellent, but there was one little piece on the sustainability, even a nod to say, as probably one of the biggest developments we could see in this town, how it wouldn't also be scrutinized and filtered with the benefits of sustainability in there. And maybe it falls under the purview of other boards, but it would seem to me it would be much more powerful if all of that best practices included the buildings, or at least a nod to it. I said earlier that, we can't supersede state law, but you can signal to developers that they will be looked at very fondly if they also meet a, high standard of sustainability. Water, not just energy, but water, waste, a full ecosystem approach, even if it's just language.
Yep.
You don't have any authority to approve it, but you could certainly signal that the town really wants all of these pieces, resiliency, all of them together.
I mean, you could require an analysis and a net zero and resilience plan and put it on the developer to explain why they can't if they choose not to.
Yeah.
It can at least, I don't see why you can't go at least that far.
Right. John, are there examples of other communities that have done that from your experience? Who've used that tactic?
Well, in Cambridge, we have that. I mean, it needs to be improved in terms of how it's applied, but yeah, there is that. And then, I think of like the NEPA process, which requires an emissions analysis and now adaptation analysis. I think there are models. I don't think it's actually that hard to do.
Ask for. Jake, I think you've had your hand up. I just want to make sure we get over to you.
Yes, sorry. I did not have a question on the Thoreau Depot. Actually, just I know we sort of dismissed the electrification trust because of, that's not really going to be moved. But I guess my only point on that was, I think we had talked the last time about this briefly, and I think Warren has been looking as part of the finance investigation into kind of potential revolving loan funds. And I just think it might be something to discuss in terms of, it sounds like the town has a different mechanism they can use, but if there is an opportunity to leverage charitable donations to support some sort of a revolving loan fund or other fund that would actually support electrification or renewable energy procurement or other activities that align with our climate goals, I think it probably is something that we should discuss at some point. So I just wanted to bring that up.
All right. I just wanted to see if there's any other, well, I guess before we move off of the Thoreau Depot Business District, so a lot of good discussion about how, we might be able to, or what we'd like to see. I guess, does that mean from a CAB position on this, that we would be asking for incorporation of sustainable goals or sustainable development, or maybe there's some way to build in the support for planning review in our response, in our affirmative support, but with this kind of caveat. Matt?
Yeah, I'm sorry I had to step away for a minute, but
That's okay.
I just wanted to say that the rules and regs for site plan review, I think that's something that's either already in process or is about to be in process for the planning board. So, and I do think that they're kind of on it with regards to it being, really being serious about trying to promote sustainability within the limits that they have. The thing I would say is an opportunity for the CAB to support this is just the nature of this type of housing is that it is more sustainable than our typical subdivisions of, quarter, half acre, whatever lots that, have 5,000 square foot houses on them. It's co-located with public transit. There are many units per acre. It's walkable, all that stuff. So I just wanted to highlight that.
That was a thought that I had is, is there, if we want to show support, and if, I guess, as you say, there's enough momentum on the site plan review, maybe we don't need to tie it to that, but is it worth offering our support from a sustainable perspective, how we see
and you could
what's being proposed, right, has could have sustainable benefit, climate benefit.
Yeah.
What does Cab think on that?
I mean, I think, I mean, I don't, I think that's valid to point out some of the benefits of denser development that's closer to transit. Well, it's transit commuter rail. It's not the same as, transit you need to get around town, right?
Sure, sure.
But I think we should be looking at this with the 2050 net zero goal in mind, and what the implications of a major development happening that's going to be fossil fuel basically works from fossil fuels, and we're in the time frame now where if the boiler furnaces last, or the HVAC system lasts till 30 years, that's past 2050.
Right, right.
So it's
I do
not.
want to highlight
it's-
that this housing is in a business district. So I mean, you can walk to stores, do your
Yeah,
shopping. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Also,
It's-
I hope that we will get a developer that gets it, but we don't know. We can't guarantee that. Yeah.
Well, right, right. Okay, well, I think this is good discussion. I feel like maybe we're not quite honing in on what type of support we want to provide for this just yet. Given that we have one more meeting before town meeting on May 1st, why don't we table it, think about it a bit, and we'll come back to it to see if we want to provide, official support or not. And just before I guess we adjourn for the evening, we won't have time to discuss, but we can put them on our next agenda. Are there any other articles that stood out that we haven't mentioned? I know, Amanda, you and I had talked about the two related to the Reformatory Branch Trail at one point. I did hear this morning that I believe that committee was not in favor. I think that's what I understood of either of them, but they're different. So I'm not sure what that means. So I don't know if they intend to take that position as well, but
I think Dean may be able to comment on the Finance Committee position on those articles. I think those are the only ones that are a vote so far. I'm not sure. I mean, it seemed like the Trails Committee was not in favor either, but and I don't know if I think the Transportation Advisory Committee is yet to rule on it.
okay.
Dean, I see you're off mute.
I'm thinking he's not there right at the moment.
Well, okay. Let me just mention that the Finance
I'm
Committee.
here, but I was just detained a little. But
Oh, that's
the
fine, that's
Finance Committee, just to comment on the Finance Committee, the Finance Committee is unlikely to take a position, as the overall Thorough Business District is not it doesn't have a financial take with the town per se. It's more of a planning issue, so it's off our
Right.
radar.
Yeah, we're
Sorry,
on to
Dean.
Reformatory
We
Branch.
moved to the
Oh,
trail.
I'm sorry, Reformatory Branch.
That's okay.
We've already taken a position on that. The Finance Committee voted to recommend no action on the Reformatory Branch spending.
Okay.
So that was our position.
And the reasoning is, I believe, that there's no current funding that's been set aside for it.
There's no, the funding sources of let's tax, people sort of outside the framework of budgeting or go to free cash are, anathema, I guess. I don't want to speak for the Finance Committee. They're anathema to me. So we're not in a position there's no funding. Nobody's come forward with funding. So,
And then when it
maybe they
came to
could-
the second one of the articles, there was no financial issue.
There's no financial issue. The Finance Committee made no recommendation. We didn't discuss.
Okay.
I would argue that we shouldn't take a stand on either of those articles. They're not central enough to our mission, and we're better off focusing on the few articles that really have a very, very high sustainability quotient.
Like Article 38 and, right?
Yeah.
It's directly
38.
related.
And the Thoreau district seems something which is worth us discussing more to see what we do. Those articles have much bigger implications for the town.
All right. Then am I understanding there's no other articles that stood out as a priority for us? Just making sure. Going once?
Yeah.
All right. All right. With that, then, I have 3 minutes. We will open it to public comment. Dean, you're the public comment. So if you so choose.
Here's your
Annabelle's a
chance,
resident.
Dean.
She might.
Oh,
have-
and Annabelle's a resident. That's right. She
Annabelle,
can
right.
comment.
I think I'll pass. I'm
Okay.
only to say thank you for your support on Article 38.
There you
And,
go.
I really appreciate it. And I think it's on a nice glide path at this point. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, I don't think I have any public comment technically. There's so much content that I have just absorbed. So as of now, I have no public comment.
Great. We appreciate you joining.
Absolutely.
All right.
I would just wanted to make one correction to the minutes, I guess. Michael, I think you had mentioned that 2 schools may need a new roof, and I think it's actually the Kais Road campus.
Oh,
Those buildings need new roofs.
Okay. Good clarification. Thank you.
And the extension of remote participation open meetings is until July 15th.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, excellent.
Glad for that. That might still miss that misses our July 20th meeting, but
Amanda,
We-
what's the name of that development that's replacing roofs?
Kai's Road. The Public Works, right?
Kai's Road, okay.
Public
Yeah,
Works
there's-
planning.
Keys Road, okay, it's Kai's.
There's 3 over there. I know, I actually can't ever remember if it's Keys or Kai's, because I know someone with the last name and it's the opposite of the
Yeah.
what we say here, and I just can't keep it straight.
I've been
There's-
told by some of the folks who have their office there that it is Kai's, but I only know that from them, so I don't know.
But there are still Kais in town, right?
Are there? Is that
I
true?
think so.
We
Wow.
should reach out and ask them for clarification. Great. And welcome to your puppy, Annabelle. Very,
That's right.
Yeah, how do you keep
Very-
that little guy quiet?
very quiet, yes.
I gotta put
Yeah,
my
well-
retriever in the other room.
Yeah, I had to rescue him and bring him in here on my lap because my puppy kept on barking at him and attacking him, and he's 13, so he wasn't really too enthusiastic about that. There was a lot of commotion going on, so I had to break him up.
Great. All right. Well, before we adjourn, I'll just say to Amanda, have a great vacation, travel.
Yeah, how
Um,
about
That
that?
will happen between now and the next meeting. Hope everything goes according to plan. Mine did not. As you notice, I'm not in San Diego as I had said I would be, I think to a few people anyway. COVID struck. So anyway, I hope it doesn't for you.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
All
Need
right.
all the luck I can get.
Yep.
Brings
yep.
back all the great ideas, right? The innovation out there.
Right. That's right. All right, terrific. Well, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Get a second.
Second,
All right. And I thought we said we didn't have to vote. Is that still correct? All right, then we
No.
are adjourned. I
Great.
declare.
fine.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you
Everybody.
all. Good to see you.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
thank you.